Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Crawley Borough Council's Planning Committee meeting. I'm Councillor Rana, Chair of the committee. There are no scheduled fire drills tonight. In the event of a fire alarm, please leave the building via the spiral staircase and the main reception door. Once outside, turn left onto Exchange Road. If you are unable to use the stairs, you will be guided to the evacuation lift. This meeting is being live streamed via the Council's YouTube channel. The comment function is not available. The Council is a data controller and will retain the data collected during the webcast in accordance with its data retention policy. Anyone seated in a public gallery should be aware that by entering the room, you are consenting to your image being captured by the automated camera system. Recordings will be used for webcasting or training purposes. The meeting agenda is available on the Council's website. Around these tables sit the committee members who will be taking decisions on the items. Officers of the Council are also in attendance, and I invite them to introduce themselves. Now, starting on my left.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Jess Tamplin, Democratic Services Officer.
Good evening, my name is Rowan Clapp. I'm a barrister at Cornerstone Barristers. I'm a legal advisor.
Good evening, I'm Clem Smith. I'm the Head of Economy and Planning.
Good evening, I'm Jean McPherson. I'm the Group Manager for the Development Management team.
Good evening, I'm Mark Robinson, Principal Planning Officer.
Thank you. Before we begin proceedings, I would like to highlight that a matter has arisen regarding Agenda Item 7, Application CR/2023/0321/FUL, Tilgate Youth Centre, Shackleton Road, Tilgate, which means it can no longer be considered by the committee this evening. The application will instead be brought to a future meeting of the committee. Thank you. So item 1 is apologies for absence. Are there any apologies, Jess?
We've received no apologies.
Thank you. Item 2 is disclosures of interest. Item 3 is lobbying declarations. And item 4 is site visit declarations, which I will pass on to Jess. Thank you.
Thank you. I will call committee members' names one by one. Please declare if you have any interests, lobbying or any site visits in relation to any of the items. Councillor Adonai, please.
Yes, I've not visited any site, I've got no interest to declare, and I've not been lobbied.
Thank you. Councillor Ashraf.
Good evening. Haven't been lobbied, have no interest to declare, and haven't visited any of the sites. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Bidwell.
Thank you. So I've got quite a few to go through. Regarding lobbying declarations, I've received lobbying from Redwood Land Investment and Three Bridges Forum, which I believe other councillors may have also received. Agenda item 8, the Three Bridges one. And with regard to interest, I've just declared a personal non-prejudicial interest, no members of the public connected to the business on the site.
And that's also in relation to agenda item 8. Thank you. And have you visited any of the application sites, please?
No, I haven't visited any of the sites.
Thank you. Councillor Charitan.
Thank you, Chair. I have not been lobbied. I have no interest to declare. I haven't visited the sites, but I am familiar with the site at item number 6, the Lazer World Spindle Way. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jaggard.
Thank you. Good evening. I've got no interest to declare. I have been lobbied on item 8. I visited the sites of 6, 7, oh 7's not on, 6, 8 and 9.
Thank you. Councillor Hilton.
Very much. I have been lobbied on item number 8 by the Three Bridges Forum through an email and personally. I also go to the doctor's surgery, Bridge Medical Service Surgery, which is right next to the premises, the proposed site, and I have visited the site on a site visit with council officers and other members.
And was that just the site for item 8?
Just the site for item 8, yes.
Thank you. Councillor Khan, please.
Thank you. I've no interest to declare and I've been lobbied on item 8 and I've not visited any sites. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mullins.
Good evening. I've no interest to declare. I am familiar with the site at item 6, but I haven't been lobbied on item 6. I've been lobbied on item 8, but I've not made any site visits.
Thank you. Councillor Morgale.
Good evening. I have no interest to declare. I have been lobbied on item 8. I have not visited the site or sites.
Thank you. Councillor Patel.
Good evening. So I haven't visited the sites in respect to the application, but I am very familiar with agenda item, the location for number 6 and number 8. In terms of interest to declare, so I live on Three Bridges Road, which is item 8, albeit not on that side, that end of the road. And in terms of lobbying for agenda item 8, I've been lobbied twice, once by Three Bridges Forum and the other time by Redwood Land. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ramsey.
Good evening. I have no interest to declare. I have not visited any of the sites and I have been lobbied regarding item 8 by the Three Bridges Forum and Redwood Lands Investment, but otherwise I haven't been lobbied for any of the other items.
Thank you. Councillor Rana, finally, please.
Thank you. I have no interest to declare. I have been lobbied on item number 8 and I have visited the site on agenda item 8. Thank you.
Chair.
Thank you.
Following Councillor Patel's interest as a resident of Three Bridges Road, I should also declare that I live in Three Bridges and I probably live closer to the site than Councillor Patel. So I should just mention that in passing.
Okay, thank you. We will now move on to the planning applications. Sorry, item 5 is approval of the minutes of the last meeting held on 24 February 2026. Does the committee agree that the minutes are accurate record of a meeting? Thank you. We will now move on to the planning applications. I will be changing the order of business according to whether we have registered speakers on the items. So the new order will be item 8, first and 6, and finally item 9. Agenda item 8 is planning application CR/2025/0345/OUT, land at 197, 195B and part of 193 and 195 Three Bridges Road. Please, can the planning officer introduce the report? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just one report update before I go through the rest of the report, and that's a late representation from the Council's Arboricultural Officer. Following the member site visit last week, it was noted that the trees in the rear garden of 193 and 195 appear to have been removed, as has a large tree to the northeast of the medical centre, and therefore these don't pose a constraint to the development. The tree in the north, to the north of the house, proposed in the northwest corner shown on the location plan, had an extensive canopy. That's also been heavily pruned to a point where it will no longer cause an impact on the development, and that can't be considered a constraint either. The trees to the rear of the pub have also been heavily pruned down in height, and some birch trees along the east boundary are still present, and those trees won't pose any constraints to the development. As a consequence of the revised changes to the trees on the site, refusal reason 4 in the report requires amendment to delete the wording shading of amenity space, which related to the impacts of the development from the nearby trees. So we need a slight amendment to refusal reason 4 to delete shading of amenity space. Thank you. So turning to the location plan, site location, which is on the screen before you. As you'll see, the site is comprises of 197 Three Bridges Road, which is the residential property that sits within a row of houses from 191 Three Bridges Road along the odd side towards Three Bridges shops. It also comprises some land from 193 and 195 Three Bridges Road, a strip of land on the eastern side and part of the rear garden of those properties, and land which is on the council's address system known as 195B Three Bridges Road, which is accessed from a narrow access which runs between 197 and the public house. So in terms of the surroundings, we've got obviously Three Bridges Road, which is along the southern part of the site, and the site fronts onto. We have Wazend Close to the west, and within those, the properties adjoining the site comprise Bridge Medical Centre, which is a sort of single and two-storey building. Fairlawn House, which is a sheltered housing block of flats, and then along the northern boundary is the properties in New Street, and then obviously around the south side of the properties and gardens of properties in Three Bridges Road itself. Let's pop up an aerial photograph because I think that's perhaps gives a clearer idea of what's on the site. So as I say, most people are probably familiar with 197 Bridges Road, which is one of the sort of period property that sits next to the Moonraker pub in a kind of clear, coherent line of properties along that street. But this aerial photograph gives quite a nice shot of what the land is like behind. It's about 0.23 hectares in size, and is laid, as you can see, primarily as hard standing with some patches of grass towards the eastern side. And then there are various outbuildings and garages not dotted around the boundary. So there's a row of detached garages at the back here, some car repair workshops and other premises around the western side, group of buildings in the middle of the site, and some properties in the southwest corner. So the applicants have helpfully provided a drawing showing the existing buildings on the site, and you can see the light shaded colours, the light orange and the light green are single-storey structures, and the darker, heavier shaded colours, dark green and the dark orange, are two-storey structures. So just to give people an idea of site context, I'll show you some photographs now. So first sort of show the street scene along Three Bridges Road. So this is looking east, looking west. So we've got the Moonraker pub here, and then the site access. Then we've got 197 Three Bridges Road and 193 and 195 in the distance. The middle photograph shows 197 Three Bridges Road, and the property on the left is the photo on the right, is the site access. So 1973 Bridges Road in the central photograph is quite an attractive period property. This is a building that will be demolished in order to widen the site access. And further to the west, you'll see that the lime tree in front of 193 and 195. And part of this property is also within the application site. Next slide shows some photographs looking east, back towards Three Bridges station. So we've got 193 and 195 in the foreground here, and the lime tree again. The middle photograph shows the single-storey brick side extension on 193, 195 Three Bridges Road, which would require demolition, and shows also that the property has been extended quite considerably to the rear, which is relevant with some of the impacts and comments in the report later. And the final photograph on the right-hand side shows the current gap between this property and 197 Three Bridges Road. So it's worth noting the high-level windows in the side elevation here. Another photograph just shows a more direct view straight north into the site from the access road. And then the heavily shadowed photo, it shows the side garden boundary of 197 as you travel down this access road. And that's just a quick shot into the beer garden of the Moonraker, which is also sort of halfway along this access road. And the picture on the right-hand side shows the site sort of when you get to the end of the access track before we sort of turn into it. Starts to show the workshop buildings, and you've got Fairlawn House in the background there, which is the 3-storey building. Again, further into the site, again, another view of Fairlawn House in the back. This is looking back and over westwards. You can see the workshop buildings in the foreground. And again, another view looking sort of northwest towards the garages in the corner, and the rooftops behind are properties in New Street. And this is a sort of close-up of the garages. And again, you can see there was a tree here. That's the one that's been heavily pruned and reduced, and is no longer an issue in terms of overshadowing. And finally, some other views looking, as you sort of stand in the site and turn around. So this is looking eastwards, back past the detached garage towards the garden of number 201 Three Bridges Road, which goes along the east side of the site. The properties in New Street and Three Bridges Road. And then the final view shows the view looking back south towards the rear of the properties in Three Bridges Road, and this large building on the corner is the back of the Moonraker public house. Turning to the proposed development now. This is the site plan. The proposal is for the redevelopment of this site, so demolishing all the buildings and structures on the land, including the house at number 197 and the lean-to extension at 193 and 95, and the erection of 2 one-bedroom flats towards the front of the site, and 10 3-bedroom semi-detached houses on the rear portion of the site, the backland part. At the southern end of the site, number 197 would be demolished to allow the widening of the access road. And as I say, the lean-to, which you might just be able to see dotted on this drawing, which is attached to 193, 195, would be demolished to allow a new property roughly on the footprint of 197 to be repositioned slightly further to the west to fit a building in on the remaining part of that frontage. That will be the two-storey block of flats. You'll see obviously that the footprint's much narrower and extends much longer, much deeper past the existing property next door. And there's a shared access way proposed to some gardens for the flat, the rear flat, ground floor flat, and the flats at 195 and 193. Further into the site, which is the land at 195B, and the part of the garden of 197 and 193 and 195, Three Bridges Road, will be for the construction of 10 semi-detached houses. Just zoom in. These are accessed from the widened driveway, which I've just explained, and they are arranged centred around a shared surface area, which would serve for both parking and turning of vehicles. In terms of layout, the 3-bedroomed houses would all be the same layout and design. Top floor has an ensuite bedroom and a dormer in the roof. So these are the floor plans. So this is the standard layout for the houses. So we've got living accommodation on the ground floor, 2 bedrooms at first floor, and an ensuite accommodation at top floor. And in terms of elevations, the design is either a tile hanging appearance, that's the front and side, and then the other options are a brick detailed elevation. And turning to the flats, they have a kitchen fronting towards 3 Bridges Road, so that's the front of them, and bedrooms at the rear. And the ground floor flat is accessed from 3 Bridges Road at the front. And the first floor flat has a doorway on the northern elevation facing into the infill plot. In terms of the elevations for the flats, obviously the front elevation, showing the ground floor flat entrance. This is the side elevation facing the access road. Side elevation facing 193, 195, and then the rear elevation serving the upper floor flat. The applicants have provided a street scene. That's obviously the existing street scene as you see it today, with 197, which is the sort of double bay fronted house in the middle here. And then what's proposed is the new flats shown here. I'm not convinced about the positioning of the houses to the rear being exactly correct in this montage, but what it does give is definitely an indication of the street scene for the houses immediately along 3 Bridges Road. So that's the street scene. So just pop back the layout. So if we take the issues, planning issues in the report in turn, so firstly the principle of development. The site is considered to be in a sustainable location within 3 Bridges neighbourhood. The land is currently used for parking, employment in form of garage repairs, as garden and a current dwelling. And as the report states, while there is some employment use, this is not a main employment area, and therefore there is no policy objection to the loss of employment uses in this location. The reuse of the land for residential is considered to be acceptable in principle, subject to compliance with other policies in the local plan. In Turning to the design considerations, this application was submitted post-adoption of the new local plan, which was adopted in 2024. And this document has strengthened the design policies and has adopted a requirement for a much more robust and rigorous design assessment to be carried out to accompany planning applications, especially major applications such as this, which are of 10 dwellings or more. These design stages are important in order to deliver the principles of good urban design, and a key stage in the process is to produce an area-based character assessment, which looks at character, distinctiveness and significance of the site and surroundings to identify the special qualities of the area. And this approach is endorsed in the National Design Code and is explained in Policy CL2. The local plan policies also encourage efficient use of available development land, particularly in sustainable locations such as this one, which is so close to Three Bridges Station. High densities are encouraged where these are appropriate in terms of the site character and context. In this case, a key concern of officers is that the applicants have not carried out sufficient design work in line with policy and have not justified how the design has addressed site character and context or made best use of land. As you will see from the officer report, the density of the development is the minimum level, 45 dwellings per hectare, expected in the local plan, well below the moderate density range of the immediate surrounding area, which is 80 to 100 dwellings per hectare. And there's no justification why a better use of the land cannot be achieved. But to be clear, the policy is not expecting high-rise flats in this location, and there is a slightly unhelpful reference in Policy CL4 to 200 dwellings per hectare near stations, which absolutely is not appropriate here. The important point of the new design policies is that the design of any layout should be informed by a clear understanding of the character of the area. And if this approach is followed correctly, this will also enable the applicant to achieve an efficient use of the site, as it will provide evidence to assist with optimising the design. As this approach has not been followed, officers do not consider that the low density of this scheme is policy compliant, and there are other indicators within the layout of the scheme which lead to the concern about poor design of this development overall. So in terms of the layout, the design that has been adopted for the housing is a uniform floor plate and elevations. If you look on the layout here, all the houses are the same size and the same layout. The pairs of houses appear to have been dropped into the layout as standard blocks of development. There's been no attempt to modify the design or reflect the shape of the site, or address the relationship to other properties or the relationship to the shared surface, which is the dominant public realm for the layout. As a consequence, many of the houses have a poor relationship to the communal parking and shared surface area, with parking spaces in front of windows and doors, and limited defensible space to key windows. These are the dining room windows from the back edge of parking areas. There's been no attempt to improve these poor relationships between windows and front doors by changes to the house design or layouts, as the mixture of dwelling types and sizes is the same. And a mixture of dwelling types could potentially work much better on this site. As a result, there are areas of land within the layout which seem unusable and wasted space. For example, the area here, where it's adjacent to the smaller plot with a small garden. And and parking spaces seem squeezed into every available corner while trying to avoid the turning area and turn on site turning head. The outlook for these houses is onto an excessive shared surface with a mixture of parking spaces and tarmac. Any parking outside of those defined areas could result in problems manoeuvring into and out of the site. The central focus of the development is the shared surface. The layout is dominated by parking, and the access road and approach are also parking dominated, with parking spaces along the side, including a disabled space which is not designed to standard. Overall, the design of the houses are considered incompatible with the area. The scale and proportions of these semi-detached houses are more characteristic of mid to late 20th century semi-detached houses, and this is an otherwise Victorian area. And so the resultant plots do look cramped due to the architectural form adopted and the regimented position of the units on the plot. The flats do not have a positive impact on the street scene. The design is considered that while attempting to replicate Three Bridges Road, the original building, they look far too narrow and excessively deep when viewed from the access road. Just put those back up. So that's the front elevation. On the side, you can see the depth of the building there. Obviously a blank elevation on the side facing the neighbour. And again in the street scene you can see it's a very deep plot. And the design proportions are poorly detailed, with a truncated roof on the side, which is just an unfortunate feature here. There are also concerns officers have about the adequacy of the accommodation for future occupants. While floor space is compliant with the nationally described space standards, the outlook from the windows is poor. The impact from the parking areas I've already explained, but other examples include the lack of defensible space and outlook for the ground floor flat. Sorry, let's go back to the layout. So they have a key lounge window that looks straight onto the side wall of the public house, both at the ground floor and actually the first floor. There's very little amenity space for the upper floor flat. It's the upper, let me just check it's the upper floor. For the ground and first floor flat. The property doesn't comply with the policy DD2, which requires accessible homes. 70% of the gardens in the layout here are under the 90 square metres minimum standard. Although, as I say, we should note from the beginning of the meeting update that concerns about shading, in particular for this property at the back, have been resolved. The upper floor flat on this layout has no private amenity space, while the ground floor flat shares its amenity space and access to it by a very long, narrow access path down the side with 193 and 195. The submitted noise report seems to only address impacts on the houses and not the flats, but the garden area of the upper floor flat, which is wrapped around the side here, could not be suitably mitigated from noise due to the need for a tall fence, which would negatively impact on the street scene. It's not clear whether the new arrangements for accessing the rear gardens of 193 and 195 would be adequate, and furthermore whether the removal of the side extension impacts on the living accommodation at these properties. The officer report deals in detail with neighbour impacts, paragraphs 5.53 and 5.54. And concern is raised with the proximity of the footprint for the flats to the rear windows in properties of 195 and 193 Three Bridges Road. This is 3 metres deeper at 2-storey level to the rear. There are also windows both in the north elevation and the east elevation facing this blank wall. So that relationship would take light and outlook from these rooms. You'll see the officer report also highlights that for matters to do with sustainability, air quality and drainage, limited information has been supplied by the applicant. And in the absence of this information, the scheme cannot be deemed to be policy compliant on these matters. Turning to affordable housing, this development offers no affordable housing on this site, which is expected on a site of this scale. It also doesn't offer any contribution in lieu of the on-site provision. You'll see that while a viability assessment has been provided by the applicant to justify this approach, it's not been subject to independent scrutiny, as officers consider the report provided is not robust and as set out in paragraph 5.67 is lacking in key evidence. The development is therefore considered to be contrary to affordable housing policy H5. Members should also note that officers have not invited the applicant to enter into a Section 106 agreement due to the overall concerns with the development. And as a result of this lack of agreement, this is also a reason for refusal. So in conclusion, while the principle of redeveloping this site for housing is supported, this proposal fails to deliver a policy compliant form of development. As you'll see from the report, there is an overall lack of detail in terms of the evidence presented, and therefore it's not possible to determine if this is a policy compliant development. In particular, the design policies in the local plan have not been addressed, as the development has not been informed by an area character assessment, which, if correctly applied, would steer the form and layout of the development. The site is considered a poor layout, parking dominated, and the design of the dwellings is not considered by your officers to provide a suitable environment for future occupiers. The refusal reasons are as set out in the officer report. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean, for your excellent presentation. There are 5 speakers registered on this item. Firstly, please will Jason Bridgewater come to the speakers table. You have 3 minutes to speak, sir.
Good evening, Chair and Committee. My name is Jason Bridgewater and I live on New Street, which directly is to the rear of this plan, to the north. I'm speaking today neither to simply object nor to support this proposal, but rather to raise a consideration for the committee regarding the matter of appropriate density of dwellings for the specific site. While I've previously raised objections about this development and have little to add to most of the points highlighted in the planning officer's report, as I maintain that position, I want to focus today specifically on the suggestion made that this proposal represents an underutilisation of the site due to its proximity to Three Bridges Station. I urge the committee to consider whether underutilisation is the correct lens here. While we all understand the need for housing, we must be careful not to view any refusal today as a mandate for an even higher density cramming exercise. The physical constraints of this backland plot, tightly hemmed in by the historic gardens of New Street and fronted by an iconic high street, would not change just because a plan presents proposed density increases. While aesthetic design can play a large factor, as referenced by the officer, density has a very clear link as to how much is actually realistic. For example, there's only so much you can do to have high density blend in. Further, many of the concerns already identified in the report would be compounded by a higher density application. Policy CL4 explicitly allows for lower density where the existing character justifies a lower figure, and I believe this is exactly such a case. We must avoid the town cramming that Policy H1 is designed to prevent. My point today is about recognising the physical reality of the site over abstract density targets. I ask the committee to ensure that any decision made today reflects the historic nature of Three Bridges, the long-term amenity of its residents, and is rationalised by other planning considerations outlined in the report, rather than any focus on a proximity to station density metric, which could later be used as a dangerous expectation for future applications. Thank you.
Thank you. Please will Andrew McNaughton come to the speaker's table. You also have 3 minutes to speak, sir.
I'm sorry, I'm just waiting. I think there's an image being put on the screen. That's it. Thank you. Thank you, Chair and Committee, for the opportunity to speak in favour of this application, providing 10 three-bed houses in a highly accessible and sustainable brownfield PDL location. The landowners have owned the site for many decades and have decided not to continue with the current commercial operations. Upgrading the site to current commercial standards is not economically viable. Moreover, they wanted to provide a housing scheme that was considerate to the character of Three Bridges and addressing any specific housing needs. There are a number of issues that merit highlighting for the consideration of the committee. The proposed 10 three-bed houses focus on the greatest undersupply of properties highlighted in Crawley's recent AMR, confirming that only 9% of the requirement has so far been delivered within the planned period. There is an over-provision of 1 and 2 bed flats, and this strategy of intensification can result in dramatic changes to the existing character of local communities. Further issues centre on the lack of demand and high development costs for these flats. The surrounding character of Three Bridges is at the heart of this proposal, implementing the principles of Victorian style and design in a predominantly semi-detached and two-storey form. There are two overriding issues with this application: density and design. As stated, the proposed design is based on the style, form and materials evident in the eclectic nature of this part of Three Bridges. The houses exceed the internal and external space standards in line with both national space standards and the Crawley Urban Design Guide. All new buildings must satisfy Building Regs Part M, but this would require separate application to Building Control post-planning. In respect to the density of the scheme, this provides 46 dwellings a hectare against the surrounding character area of 35 dwellings per hectare. This is therefore an uplift of 31% provided in a sympathetic policy and compliant manner. Policy CL4 requires borough-wide density of at least 45 and seeks up to 200 dwellings per hectare in areas close to train stations, unless the character of the surrounding area dictates otherwise. In this instance, Crawley's desire for a potential upper limit of 200 dwellings per hectare would result in a block of 52 flats of some 6 stories, and this would have far-reaching impacts on the character of the area, with further undesirable impacts for shadowing, daylight and, importantly, overlooking. Furthermore, the parking requirement would not be able to be met, leading to substantial overspill parking onto an already pressurised road network. The scheme is unable to provide affordable housing, as mentioned, resulting from the demolition of 197 and the commercial elements associated with the yard. A full economic appraisal was submitted, and this is required in all situations detailing viability. There are no statutory objections to this scheme, and it offers many benefits, including improved pedestrian connectivity, landscaping, enhanced surface water drainage, and on-site biodiversity net gain exceeding 10%. We would ask the committee to approve the application.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Please will John Cuban come to the speaker's table. You have 5 minutes to speak, sir, as you are speaking on behalf of a group.
Is this on now? Good evening, Madam Chair, Planning Committee members. Thank you for this opportunity to speak on behalf of civic and local representative groups. My name is John Cuban. I'm Vice Chairman of Three Bridges Forum and also represent Hazelwick Road Conservation Area Advisory Committee. I've lived in Three Bridges for 50 years, mostly in Hazelwick Road, from which there are some limited views beyond New Street over parts of the application site. Although you have a committee report concluding a recommendation to refuse the application, my purpose is to ask you to vote against accepting the officer recommendation and instead to use your vote to permit the outline application for 10 houses and 2 flats. Very recently, you should have received an email from Three Bridges Forum giving our reasons for why you should permit the modest 10 house scheme in preference to the looming threat of an alternative which is far, far worse. You may therefore recognise some of the images from those I hope will come up to support what I have to say in the next few minutes. The new town of Crawley owes its existence in no small part to the presence of the Victorian Railway junction and station at Three Bridges, with its growing settlement to build a community serving the railway. The 1910 OS map shows the housing established in Hazelwick Road, New Street, Mill Road, North Road, and the High Street, now Three Bridges Road. By 1966, the date of this aerial photo, the shape of the village was firmly established within the new town neighbourhood and is still recognisable today as the street pattern mainly within the triangle formed by Hazelwick Road, North Road and Three Bridges Road. The application site is the pale shape, lower left of the centre, just below New Street. Hazelwick Road was designated as a conservation area in 2013. Its formal statement was published in 2019, and it has to be said that in spite of the credit given by its authors to the advisory committee, the council's forward planning section essentially wrote, prepared and produced it. However, it was during the statement's preparation that the view of the advisory committee grew that the whole of the main triangular shape of the Victorian and early 20th century village was worthy and in very much need of the protection afforded by conservation area status. Coincidentally, to the period following the submission of the application, the local profile of the railway village has been raised to new heights as an amazingly well illustrated in a recently published book titled Betty Allen's Three Bridges, using photographs and early 20th century postcards from the Peter Allen collection. While reflecting the changes over the years, what really stands out from the book is how much of the built heritage illustrated in its principal chapter still defines the character of the High Street and its surrounds that we can see today. It really challenges the credibility of what is now threatened by the policies behind recommended dismissal of the 10-house planning application. It should go without saying that any access to accommodate so much more than the 10-house application while having less impact on the street is inconceivable. I'll leave it to others to explain the issue surrounding modal shift to sustainable transport options of a much larger scheme. The hope is that we would not now accept the same level of loss of original street frontage to that when similar urban backland had been opened up for the neighbouring development of Wassand Close in the 1980s. But a main point of contention is the repeated reference in the officer report to policies, particularly CL4 and H3B, regarding densification and densities, suggesting that a 5 or 6 storey block of as many as 52 flats is justified due to proximity to Three Bridges Station. The projected and increasing weight being attached to these policies should so obviously not apply in the Three Bridges case, where built heritage is at stake. And yet the refusal of the modest 10-house application appears so likely in a future application for something so very much worse being irresistible, especially in the absence of a conservation area review. It's for this reason that I appeal to the planning committee members to see reason and eliminate the threat of housing densities inappropriate to the built heritage values of Three Bridges Village by voting not to refuse or delay the modest 10-house application, but instead to permit it subject to reserved matters and conditions. It's understood that such a permission would come with a binding obligation from the applicant to the council for financial support of an urgently needed review of extended conservation area protection. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Coburn. Please will Councillor Pritchard come to the Speaker's table. You have 5 minutes to speak as a ward councillor for Three Bridges. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, committee members. I don't know how I can follow that. John is a stalwart in the community that I represent and much respected. Firstly, it is clear that Crawley needs more housing. The site in question is a prime location for housing to be placed, being in very close proximity to Three Bridges Station and bus routes that serve the whole of Crawley. And if this application is refused, the site is likely to be redeveloped fairly soon, probably with a developer that is less sympathetic to the surrounding area and without the generous concessions offered by this developer. It is also completely understandable that there are a lot of objections to the application, as people living in the area don't want their local environment to change, as they respect the history of the area. It is clear that these two positions cannot be reconciled entirely. The question being determined by this planning application is therefore the type and scale of that development. Despite what the officer has explained in her presentation, throughout the pre-application process, the planning officers have been pressing for a far more dense development, which we have seen with the images displayed, would be significantly visually damaging to the historic location on the back of the former high street of Three Bridges Village, now Three Bridges Road. At each of the meetings I have had with the developers, they have insisted that they were under pressure to increase the density of the site. The local plan is designed to maximise the provision of housing in Crawley, particularly in areas such as this, with good public transport connectivity, and rightly so. It also caveats this with the requirement to consider the character of the area. And this is why I'm satisfied that this development is the best option. It exceeds the minimum density required in the local plan for any development in Crawley, being more dense than the immediate surrounding area. It's of note that the density shown in paragraph 5.9 is only accurate if you draw a circle around the site large enough to incorporate Pembroke Park, which is some distance away across two main roads and a playing field in this very distinctly separate part of Three Bridges. Back to the character of the area. Much of the housing in the locality is terraced or semi-detached two-storey houses, many of which have dormer conversions. The area predates the coming of the railway in the 30s and is older than the adjacent Hazelwick Road, which is the subject of a conservation area. The vista along Three Bridges Road is of historic housing of differing styles as you move along the road. The proposed development is for tastefully designed semi-detached housing which is styled to complement the locality. The replacement for 197 Three Bridges Road is styled to match the original house as closely as possible so as not to be too jarring a change. The choice here is between this tasteful development, which meets the requirements of the local plan, or for a future developer to accede to the requests of officers, building a block of apartments which will tower over the gardens in New Street and be seen above the roofline in Three Bridges Road. Make no mistake, despite the general perception that the planning committee can pick or choose developments, they would be powerless to stop the alternative. Members of Three Bridges Forum have been consulted and a document produced by them has been circulated to members, setting out their concerns. It's also notable that all three of the councillors for the area here are supporting the application, something very rare for the planning applications. You will hear from Councillor Nawaz and myself, but due to an administrative oversight, Councillor Burgess is unable to speak at this meeting, although she wished to support the application and she's sat behind me. It is also absurd to propose as a reason for rejection the absence of a Section 106 agreement and the individual items that would make part of such an agreement when the developer hasn't been given the opportunity to negotiate such an agreement. It is of note that during the pre-application process, the only objection repeatedly made to the developer was that of density. In fact, a number of the reasons given for rejection have only been known to the developer upon production of the agenda for this meeting. The developer has attempted to work with officers through email and telephone, but often these have gone unanswered. This ambush approach by officers is not in keeping with a requirement of Local Plan Policy SD1, which requires officers to work in a constructive and collaborative manner. I would urge the committee to indicate approval for the plan and to delegate the planning decision to the head of Planning and Economic Development, subject to a Section 106 agreement being put in place and a settlement of other outstanding issues. Thank you very much, committee.
Thank you, Councillor Pritchard. Now may Councillor Nawaz come to the speakers table. You also have 5 minutes to speak as ward councillor for Three Bridges.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to speak as a ward councillor, not in the capacity of a cabinet member for planning and economic development at all. And I'd like to explain why, on balance, I believe this application is capable of being supported. I want to clear at the outset that I recognise the concerns raised by officers and I do not dismiss them. However, planning decisions require us to consider policy, local circumstances and practical outcomes together. rather than relying solely on a narrow and overly technical interpretation of individual policies. Chair, we have formally declared housing emergency in Crawley, and the context must inform our decision making. While there is often a strong focus on density, density alone is not the solution. We also need the right mix of homes. The scheme delivers 10 three-bedroom houses, which are underprovided and in high demand in Crawley, particularly for larger families. In policy terms, local policy CL4 requires a minimum density of 45 dwellings, as mentioned by officers as well, per hectare, and this scheme delivers around 46, meaning it's compliant. While high densities are encouraged in sustainable location, there's not an absolute requirement. And officers themselves acknowledge the very high figures, such as 200 dwellings per hectare, are unrealistic on this site, given its Victorian context. Policy CL4 allows the character-led judgment, and in that context, the proposal should be seen as policy compliant, not policy deficient. Another issue, as I said, I'm a ward councillor and work in Three Bridges as well. Parking and day-to-day impact are critical here, given the site's proximity to Three Bridges station and its location within a controlled parking zone. Parking pressures is already significant, and a much higher density flatted scheme would almost certainly lead to overall parking concern, overspill parking, enforcement problems, resident frustration, and experience a greater risk of disturbance and antisocial behavior. By contrast, family house with allocated parking are far more likely to function sustainably in this location. In that context, moderate density house-led scheme is not failure to optimize land, but a pragmatic and responsible response to local conditions. This part of Three Bridges Road is already predominantly residential with a mix of houses, flats, and community uses, and it's not within a conservation area. The character here is mixed and evolved, and redevelopment of underused land is not out of keeping with the context. The proposal remains two-story, reflecting the prevailing scale of surrounding development, as mentioned by John Cuban, Three Bridges Forum, and officers, is a Victorian context. And any concerns about layout or amenity are localized design matters, keep in mind, and that can be addressed through conditions and revisions, not reasons to reject the principle of development. I also welcome the applicant's willingness to work constructively through Section 106 contribution towards extension assessment of the conservation area, which is a positive and responsible approach. I accept that the proposal does not yet meet the affordable housing policy, relying on a viability appraisal, and officers rejected the appraisal but did not independently test it. I believe developers have used the same consultant which used by CBC on many occasions in the past. I believe the appropriate response here is negotiation, not refusal. By supporting the scheme in principle, this committee retains the ability to secure a commuted sum, infrastructure contribution, and design improvements. Refusal removes the opportunity entirely. Chair, I would remind my members that planning has always been a matter of judgment and balance, not simply the mechanical application of policy or technical standards in isolation. Policies guide us, but they cannot anticipate every site-specific circumstances. As members, we are required to apply those policies with common sense, taking into account what will actually work on the ground and what will deliver a sustainable outcome for the area in the long term. In this case, a strictly technical approach that prioritizes maximizing density risks overlooking real and well-documented issues around the parking pressure, community impact, and long-term management. Chair, in conclusion, this scheme delivers much-needed three-bed family homes, complies with local plan policies, reflects the residential character of this side of Three Bridges Road, and takes a realistic approach to parking and community impact. The issues raised are resolvable, not fatal, and on the basis I believe this committee would be justified overturning the officer recommendation and approved subject to conditions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nawaz. We will now move on to a debate. Do any committee members wish to speak? Please raise your hand. Burton?
Thank you, Chair. I wouldn't normally interject at this point because I'm conscious it needs to go over to the committee for consideration, but I am somewhat concerned with some of the visual material that's been presented this evening, which is not part of this planning application, not least the mock-up block of flats that has been shown, which is a sort of indicative scheme that someone's made up, and that's not part of what's being considered tonight at all. There seems to be some general misunderstanding about density, and as I've said in my presentation, and I won't labour the point too much, but I'm happy to clarify anyone that's got any questions. It's about understanding the character of the area first and the design, and then working out what's right for the scheme. So we're not suggesting that there's 200 houses, 200 dwellings and a block of flats. That's not exactly what the policy says. The policy is saying that if you do good design properly, you start with the character and you do that assessment, and then you work through, and that informs what's right for the site. So it could be that if that approach was followed correctly, that the design could come back and be improved and be something that's similar to what you're seeing this evening. But as I say, officers have not supported a block of flats, and I want to say sort of categorically now that what was shown as a visual is 100% unacceptable. So I just wanted to clarify that point.
Thank you, Jean. So first of all, we have Councillor Cheriton, please.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, there's a lot of concern. I think you've addressed some of the questions I had, because it wasn't clear to me, and you did stress the fact that the rather scaremongering picture of multiple story block of flats looming behind it, that we would not pass that in planning committee. It would not go through us. Absolutely not. It's also against all of the planning considerations that have been given here at all. So I would urge people in Three Bridges to dismiss that from your mind. I don't know where you've got that from, in all honesty. I have my suspicions, but dismiss that. It's not what's being talked about here. What I would like us to focus on is the points the officers have been making, which is the poor density use and the poor layout. I think we would be doing ourselves a disservice, and we'd be doing a disservice to the people of Three Bridges if we accepted something of poor design in that area. Better things could be made of it, I think. That's what I see from that. That's what I'm hearing from the officers saying. A certain amount of density improvement, and it would be interesting, the question would be to the officers is, what level of density would they be talking about? Because I think that might offer some reassurance. I don't think we're talking about hundreds of dwellings here. We're talking about a certain amount of improvement in the level of density that's available on that site. And that's important because, as has been mentioned here earlier, Crawley has a problem with housing, and we need to house as many people as we can. We don't have to cram them in, but if we can make better use of the site, we should. There are also design issues with that site. There are design in terms of where the houses are based, the style and character of the houses. There's numerous things that are wrong. And I personally could not approve something if I know that something better in its place could be put. So I would put that on that. That's my reasoning at this point. And as I say, this is not to say, but my question is, given what Councillor, Councillor Atif was saying, which is essentially, if this is refused, does that kill it dead? I don't believe it does. I believe that it goes back to another process of consultation whereby hopefully we can get a better design. Am I correct in my assumption around that? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Adenay.
Thank you, Chair. I also want to share some of the views of Councillor Sheraton about the imagery that has been sent around about the 52 blocks of flats, and that's, as I said, I was led to say that it will not pass through this committee. I personally would not want to support that because that's a high density for a small area. And I've looked at the reasons why this application is being refused by the officers. And you mentioned poor quality design, appearance, layout, and which fails to address the context and the character of that area. But from the design, that for what I can see, from what I've been presented, these are lovely designs. But if we have to go with what Councillor Navas Atif has said, can we have a review of this plan, so that it can fall in line with what the officers want, so that this development can take place? And I so much love the fact that there is, from what has been designed here, there is enough parking space for cars, and there's a disabled parking over there too, and it is, well, to me, the layout is okay. But if there's there are areas where there should be some improvement, possibly we can have a look at it again and reconsider this. Thank you.
Jean, if you'd like to just take over, thank you.
Thank you. I'll try and do both sets of councillors' questions, I know. So in terms of what level of density would be appropriate, that, as is informed by a character assessment, a design appraisal process. So I would, it's not going to be the upper limit that's set out in the plan. And I want to make clear that the policy, which is the adopted policy, does say it's subject to character. It's always subject to character. And that's always as members, your get out of jail card, if you like, if a scheme seems too much. The difficulty with this application is that character hasn't really been carefully enough assessed, and I think that's reflected in the layout. So if it was refused tonight, I think this is Councillor Cheriton's comment, would the scheme be dead? Well, this application would be in that sense. But yes, the site is absolutely suitable for residential in other respects. So we would hope that the applicants would come in and rework the scheme so that something acceptable could be delivered, because we desperately need affordable housing. In terms of, can we look at the plan if it was approved tonight? I'm not sure what the recommendation is going to be on that, but effectively, if you were to overturn the recommendation tonight, you would be effectively approving the scheme very much along the lines you see there. I don't think there's scope for much negotiation if that's the second option. So it depends on what the members decide.
Eugene. Councillor Jaggard, please.
Thank you. I've just thrown water all over myself. Sorry. Yeah, I had a very interesting site visit with the planning officer, and I have to say that I find this application rather contradictory and leaves me completely confused. In the report, paragraph 5.11 reminds us that this site sits in the oldest part of Three Bridges, surrounded predominantly by Victorian and Edwardian two-storey buildings, and number 197 is very much part of the character, with its historic brick wall and former hayloft outbuildings. Now, when I visited the site, I was genuinely surprised that it wasn't already part of a conservation area. I thought it was. The Hazelwick Conservation Area Committee originally objected to the demolition of 197, and they were asking to extend the conservation area boundary. They asked for time to review that, and I think that was actually a reasonable request, because I can share their concern that demolishing of that property and replacing it with what is effectively half a house would leave a very awkward, unbalanced street scene, and it would create a lopsided, unattractive frontage. And I think that is rightly captured in the refusal reason too. It would just not look good along that road. And we should also remember that the long-standing businesses operating in the yard behind the site, although it's not a formal employment designated area, the businesses have been operating there for many, many years, and it would be a real loss if a development went in there and forced those businesses to close down. Refusal reasons 3 and 4 point to a very clear picture that the development is simply too cramped, with small gardens, poor outlook, shaded amenity space and an overall poor living environment for future residents. And this is where I begin to struggle with the report, because at the same time we are told in refusal reason 1 that the scheme falls short because it's not dense enough. We cannot reasonably argue that 10 homes are both too cramped yet not making effective use of the land. The positions don't sit easily together. And my concern is that by refusing the scheme on density grounds, we risk sending a signal that we actually want more development here, potentially 2 or 3 storey blocks of flats, which would be far more damaging to the Victorian character of this street and far more damaging to the neighbouring residents. So my suggestion, which I'm putting to officers, and I'm not sure whether we can do this, is in refusal reason 1, remove the density argument CL4 and refuse the application on the other grounds of layout. I don't know whether this can be done. And that would send a clear message that the problem is not that the scheme is too small, but that the design and layout and impact on the street are wrong. It would give the applicant opportunity to come back with a better scheme while giving the Hazelwick Road Conservation Committee time to pursue a potential extension to the conservation area and protect this small but historic part of Three Bridges High Street. You know, planning is not about squeezing more and more units in. It's about the right development in the right place that respects the character of our communities. So I wonder if we can remove the density issue from the refusal reasons, and then any application that comes in the future will, you know, be of a similar density to this, which is compliant with our policies. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jagger. Jean, please.
Sorry, Chair, I just needed a few minutes to think that proposition through. I mean, obviously the officer report is a recommendation, and yes, the refusal reasons in theory could be amended if members voted on that and felt that was appropriate. So yes, there is no reason why, if you didn't feel you wanted to refuse it on CL4, you could amend refusal reason 1. I think you'd have to propose the wording in terms of what elements you think as a committee or as a member you would like to see in there. But yes, in theory that's possible.
Thank you. Can I do that then? Can I propose that we remove the CL4 density argument from the refusal? I propose that. I don't know whether anybody is willing to second it, but that's what I propose.
But before there's a seconder selected to that, can I just recommend that the debate continues until everybody's spoken, and then we'll come to that after everybody feels they've had a chance.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sue Mullins.
Thank you, everyone. This has really become quite a confusing debate, because it's not quite what I expected when I came in this evening after I'd read all the papers. This is a small development on the big scheme of things. It is a small development, but it is in one of the oldest parts of Three Bridges, and therefore it needs to be treated in a very sympathetic fashion and to make sure it fits well into the street scene. I've listened to all the debate about what's actually being proposed at the moment for this scheme, and there are an awful lot of things I'm not happy with at all about it. The size of the gardens, the parking, the layout, the 2 one-bedroom flats at the front, which looks like half a house chopped in half. It just doesn't look right at all. Awful lot of the scheme I find very concerning. And the most concerning thing I think I've found is that it's suddenly become a big argument about density. When we look at the town plan, yes, we do talk about density, but it's density that is appropriate to the area. Now, we can talk about that we need more housing and we need more flats, we need more this, that and the other, but on a small development like this, what the sort of development that's being proposed is ideal if it was of a good a good layout, a good way of making the houses look, something that looks as though it would fit in with the area. And at the moment, the way it's been proposed is very poor. I don't like the way the houses are designed. I don't like the way the road comes in, the turning area, the way the parking is proposed. It's higgledy-piggledy, it's all over the place. And we all know that it doesn't matter how many parking places you provide, you always end up needing far more. And then people end up parking in inappropriate places. And we have what we have all over Crawley in a lot of our closes, where suddenly you can't get an ambulance in, you can't get a fire engine in because people have parked where they shouldn't. There's an awful lot wrong with this scheme, but it worries me greatly that there's somebody set the hairs running and saying, well, actually what's being proposed here, if you don't agree to this poor scheme, you're going to end up with a great big enormous tower block sitting in there. And I don't think that this committee would ever even consider that in this situation at all. So I think the proposal to remove the density situation on item 1, which has been proposed, and I'd be very happy to second that, because I think this is a good place to develop a small scheme, not a huge, great scheme, not a block of flats, but perhaps a better scheme than this one. And I would like perhaps our planning officers to go back to the developer and say, yes, 10 houses is great, 2 flats are great, but please think again about how you propose to use the land, and let's have a better scheme come forward.
Thank you, Councillor Mullins. Over to you, Jean.
Not sure I've got any specific comments for those. Thank you.
Ms. Councillor Patel, please.
I mean, it's along the same lines, but there's obviously a lot of concern from the community. So, and there is a bit of confusion here, and it's because I think style and character is mentioned, and density, and to me, I can understand how they interrelate, but they're also different things. Density to me seems okay. I mean, I don't think we would want to be more dense than this, and I think that's the clear line, and I think what was put forward makes sense. And then on the style and character, that's a separate point. So I accept maybe there's a question about changing the style and character, and if we can be more specific on that point, but the density is fine. And if that's not the right interpretation, then it would be good to understand that. And there's also the claim, obviously, that the developer was not aware of some of these concerns before this was published. So again, I don't know going forward how we do this in terms of do we reject it and remove that density claim, or do we approve it subject to conditions that the style and character is agreed on? That's my second question. And the third point was affordable housing. So I understand that there's no affordable housing, but given that we've seen contributions before from other developments where there's no affordable housing, is it not right that that's also agreed, that there is a contribution to affordable housing? And is that something that also helps the application or from a planning point of view? Thank you.
If you'd like to add anything to it, Jean.
Yeah, I'm just trying to sort of piece this through, because the debate's a little bit unexpected for me as well on some of this. I just want to go back to Councillor Jaggard's point, having reread the refusal reasons. I mean, if people are concerned about density, that whole refusal reason 1, it might be that the answer is to remove that refusal reason from the recommendation, if that's what members wanted to do, if they're worried about density. Because all the other issues, if you like, I've just read a sort of poor design, and all the other things you've been talking about are covered under the other refusal reasons. So that's one option you could potentially put forward. In terms of other issues such as affordable housing, I mean, obviously that is a major concern for officers, that nothing's been offered on this site. And as I did say in the report, the the viability appraisal wasn't sent off, partly because of the concerns with other aspects of the design of the development, but also that the viability report didn't really cover all the aspects we would have expected it to send it off to the district value anyway. So it was a bit deficient on information. But yes, there is perhaps a concern, if you like, that you've got a brand new plan, you've got a housing emergency, and you've got a potential site here which will not deliver you any affordable housing, and policy-wise it should. In terms of how you move that forward, I say that's, I think, matter for the committee to debate. You'll have to obviously vote first of all on the officer recommendation and go from there. But I don't know how much negotiation we can do on the current design. I think as officers we would feel that that there could be a lot more that could be done with this site, and it would probably be easier to make a decision on what you've got before you this evening.
Can I come back on? Yeah, so sorry, just so I'm clear, if we remove the density point, then this is not about, because there's obviously a lot of concern, given the images that were shown, this won't be about increasing the number of dwellings, it's just be about the style and character. Is that the proposal? That's the first thing. And the second thing, on affordable housing, though, we've seen proposals go through where there's been a contribution to affordable housing, if they don't have affordable housing as part of a development. Is that not also something that can be considered?
I don't think it can be considered this evening, as we haven't got the evidence on the viability, because, as I say, in all other respects, the application is considered not to be policy compliant for the 10, 11 reasons on the paper. Yes, I mean, it's usually, if affordable housing can be done as an exception if it's subject to a robust viability appraisal, but that isn't what we've received with this application. And yeah, I mean, as I say, I'm not. We're voting. Well, the officer recommendation is still for refusal. So, yes, you can take off the refusal reason on density and efficient use of land. That's a matter for the committee. So I'm trying to think what else I need to say. Do you want to step in? Okay, sorry, apologies. If obviously if the officer recommendation in some form goes through tonight, any revised application would need to have a viability assessment again done against it. Might be for a different mix of units or a different number of houses, and that could be subject to a viability appraisal, which would be available for the committee to consider at the appropriate time when the application came in. Yeah, that would obviously establish whether there's any physical on-site provision, a contribution, or a planning condition.
Thank you. Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Chair. As you know, that there is a housing emergency, and that's what I'm looking at. That yes, we do need properties, and it sounds good that 10 properties, but what I want to know is, can the developer not work with the officers, and then we can approve it subject to conditions, work with the officers and see what can be done, because they're saying that the outlook and the it doesn't, because what they're saying is that the I think the housing and I think that it doesn't look good, but can that not be looked at and try and work with the developers? Because I think Councillor Pritchard said, I think the developers were not getting a response from the officers. So if we can, subject to like conditions and not refuse it, because we do need houses. Thank you.
Do you have anything to add to that, Jean?
I think the problem is we're being asked to make a decision or comment on what we're seeing in front of us tonight. And in our officers' views, there are there's clearly some way to go to get an acceptable design. So I'm not sure that the decision to sort of would effectively be a deferral and a renegotiation is going to get this over the line as far as the officers are concerned. I think this needs quite a redesign. I think our preference would be to make a decision on this as it stands tonight. Obviously, the case officer, the applicant says he's got issues with the officers. We'll have to investigate that. The current case officer has actually left this authority now, so it would be a new officer to look at it fresh with the applicants going forward.
Thank you. Councillor Bidwell.
Thank you, Chair. Okay. I agree with Councillor Jaggar's point regarding the wording. My initial suggestions would be that the developers go back and look at the refusal reasonings and address those. And again, I know that you've said perhaps it's not how it should be done, but I would say, can we consider accepting it on the conditions that the refusal reasons are addressed? Again, Councillor Mullins has made the point that this is needs to be number of houses appropriate to the density of the area. But I think it's quite clear from the road that it's on that it just can't support density. I think the first thing that stood out to me was there were 32 total bedrooms, if you like, 10 dwellings, 2 flats. 10 dwellings had 3 bedrooms, 32 rooms occupied, and 17 parking spaces. That to me stood out as maybe a little bit of a concern. I think any more than that is just pushing it. Looking at the road, Three Bridges Road, it's cramped as it is. I came to full council and asked the question regarding the density of parking in neighbourhoods. Springplat's been an area of concern to me. The town was built in a time where we couldn't cater for as many cars as we've got going on. I think we'd just be causing further issues with more parking and further density in that area is going to cause further parking issues. I think on the grounds of further strain on Three Bridges Road alone, it's something to question. But those are my observations.
Would you like to add anything to it, Jean? Thank you. Councillor Hilton.
Thank you, Chair. My issue with this application is the design, and if we accepted it as it was, it would put a coach and horses through some of our local plan policies, which have been robust and strengthened. And I am a bit concerned that, although I believe there was an early discussion about this, that since our local plan has been accepted and been ratified with examination, that this has got to this stage. And what really concerns me is that, and I've got really trying to choose my words carefully here, but I'm concerned about the graphics I've seen about the 52 flats. And what I would hope hasn't happened here is that to get one development through, we have seen other things develop to worry people, quite rightly, about density, when actually the big problem here is design. And I think I can understand the efficient, cramp and inefficient, and I like to think, I'm a councillor in Fallswood, and the designs are really good. What would come out here would be like a late 19th century development we've seen in other parts of towns, and all that comes with it. So I'm really concerned the way this is developed, and I'm just concerned what has been going on behind the scenes between the officers and applicant, and why there's been some kind of dialogue up to now, because to see something which is related to the plan application in the Three Bridges the forum's consultation to us, and it really concerns me, because the bottom line is, as Councillor Mullins said, it's not a good sign. The frontage isn't good, the parking isn't good, they've just been plopped down, no real discussion about what's been going on, how it's been developed. And I'd be quite happy to support Councillor Jaggard's recommendation, because in the end, the policy of the local plan hasn't changed, has it? The policy of the local plan is that, yes, you could have more density if it's in line with the character of the place. And although I wouldn't want any more density than there is now, it's got to be in character. And there's no way on earth we would have accepted 52 flats as a planning committee. I'm a part-time member of the planning committee. I come and go, as it were. But I'd be quite happy, because I could not accept anything which would have such an impact and a precedent on future planning policy for us. So on that basis, I'm happy to support Councillor Jaggard's proposal that we refuse the original application, and that we take away the density, and that we really look, the applicant, if they are serious about their commitment to Three Bridges, the street scene, the conservation area, that if they're really, really committed to this area, that they do what's right and work with the council and get it right for the scheme, because everyone will be happy then.
Thank you, Councillor Hilton.
Just a really quick thing. If we take out the... Oh, sorry.
Are you first? Councillor Ramsey first. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm not sure how similar Ramsey and Mullins sound, but even I got confused then. Thank you, Chair. I echo a lot of what Councillor Hilton's just said, and I would support Councillor Jaggard's amendment. And I don't think there's any real prospect that an ultra high density development would be supported by this committee or really any kind of future committee. But there are just a couple of things I want to clarify in terms of the committee's powers and council's powers more broadly, which is, I guess my first question is that under the current system, I don't think that there is a scenario where if we were to refuse tonight, an ultra high density proposal could then happen without it coming back past us. So essentially, I just want to make sure there's not a scenario where we refuse tonight and then in a year or two we're reading that a different proposal went through without our input. Like, there's no way that could kind of go past us. And then, assuming my understanding is correct of the current system that kind of retains our powers of refusal, I was also wondering if officers be able to offer a view in terms of whether or not the current system will continue even past local government reorganisation, because obviously, the system as it stands at the moment might be able to prevent an ultra high density development, but I'm wondering if officers are aware of any kind of changes upcoming under unitary authorities that would mean that actually planning developments could go ahead without as much local councillor input as we're seeing tonight. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Could the answer to Councillor Ramsey's question is any development over 10 units or more has to come to the Planning Committee. That's under the Crawley Borough Council Constitution. Obviously, with local government reorganisation, scheme of delegation could change, but we're some years off that, and I would hope that something alternative would come back before then. But yes, in this case, you would always get to make the decision on any development on this site if it's more than 10 units.
Thank you. As Councillor Ashraf has not spoken yet, I'll let him speak and then get back to the other councillors.
Just to confirm what Jean just said, the officer in that, we have got 2 years left, and I would hope a scheme would come back way before then, and as a matter of urgency, come back so we could, as a committee, probably look at it again.
Thank you, Chair. My observation is this is a sustainable in-town housing site. The principle of residential redevelopment is supported. The loss of employment use is not a policy bar. Many consultees do not object. Highway safety is not a standalone refusal issue. Parking numbers comply. Internal space standards comply. Housing mix is acceptable. Ecology can be conditioned, and most neighbors' impacts, they are acceptable. So my question is, if it's an outline application, can the design and layout not be changed later? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. In this case, it is an outline application, but the only matter that's reserved for a later approval is landscaping. So in this case, the layout and the design and the access, means of access, is all part of the application you're considering tonight. So the answer to change is no.
Thank you. Councillor Mullins.
Thank you. What I would like to just make sure very clear is if we remove reason for refusal, reason 1, with the density, would that then apply to any future application? So if this developer came back, or a different developer came back with a different design, would it still be judged on density, or would it become a completely separate application that then we'd have to go back all through the arguments about density again? Because I think that's what all the committee are very concerned about, that this is an area that needs sympathetic development. We don't want blocks of flats there. None of us here want blocks of flats. And I almost feel like we're being railroaded into making a decision about an area. We're not happy with it. We're not happy with the design. We're not happy with an awful lot of elements of it. But we're being railroaded into it by saying, well, if we get LGR, somebody else might make that decision for us. Or, you know, or the threat of a block of flats and upsetting people and saying we're going to build a great big block of flats there, which this committee most definitely would not. I just think we're being put in, as members, a really difficult situation. We're not happy with the development, but we're being told to make a decision for the wrong reasons, and that worries me greatly.
Thank you. Jean?
I think it's for the committee to decide whether they want to impose refusal reason 1 on the when they vote on that. That's for this application. I mean, the policies are still there, and all the policies are somewhat wrapped up in each other. They all need to be read in the round. So taking out one doesn't really undermine or undo all the others. And I think the important thing is, again, that all the design policies are, if you like, underpinned by the character argument again. And if the design and the evidence shows the character of the area should be a lower density, then that trumps the other policies. So, yeah, I mean, written down. Yeah, so my view is you'd have to look at it again afresh if a new application came in, because we'd have to reference it. But we'd be looking at it again, I suppose, in the light of your previous refusal and what you refused it on. But we would have to obviously give it some weight in any future consideration. But obviously we're aware of what's gone before. The planning history, if you like, is a material consideration.
Thank you. Councillor Cheriton.
Second bite of the apple here. On the point about density, I might point out that isn't something that's just been, as it were, come out of the inventive mind of council officers. That's been a policy developed with council members, i.e. us councillors and council officers. So if we go against the grain of what the officers are proposing here, effectively we're saying, well, we're kind of ignoring our own local plan for this particular area. So do keep that in mind. I think in terms of density, I understand the concerns, and it's unfortunate there isn't something more concrete that can be said about density. So a lot has been said about the density being appropriate to the character of the area, but what that exactly translates into, I think we're all left a little bit sort of, vague. And I do understand why that is, but it leads to people to believe, we've had this image put in our head of hundreds of flats, and towering over the local area. And I don't think that is the case. I think when we talk about density, we're talking about tweaking about a few extra potential dwellings that would increase the number of people that could live in the area. And it's appropriate, I think, for that. My fear is that some fear-mongering has been done here by persons unknown to push through a development which will be, nice and sort of profitable for the people that are building it, but not necessarily to the benefit of the people of Three Bridges or indeed people looking for accommodation in Crawley, particularly desirable accommodation close to Three Bridges. That would be one observation. The other thing I would say as well is in terms of how we vote this evening, if we accept the officer's recommendation to refuse, what that means is the developer has to go away, think about it, and we hope submit a better design. That's what we're hoping. If they're not, then it's like, well, what are they doing in the first place? Why would they not want to do that? Since they clearly think that the area has potential. But if they don't, it's like, well, what commitment did they have in the first place? I would argue. If we go against the officer recommendation here, if we decide to say no, we're going to take for this. What I'm hearing is there is no scope for any further changes to this. We would effectively say, yes, go ahead, build it as it is, subject to the issue about the landscaping. So that's the thing to keep in mind. We've got one of the two options here. Even if we take out the density option, that's another possibility. That means a resubmission comes back with the same number of dwellings. Fair enough. But I think that's going against our local plan. Like I said before, if a local plan, if a better design is out there with better locations, better design of houses and so on, and accommodates a few more people, I think it's worth refusing on this application on that basis. Thank you.
Councillor Cheriton. Jean, did you want to add anything? Okay, as Councillor McWally hasn't spoken. Councillor McWally?
Yeah, thank you. I think we seem to be forgetting something. The officers have reminded us of policy H5, which confirms that an affordable housing contribution will be required from all residential developments in the borough. The policy requires 40% affordable housing in this location. Yeah, blah, there's lots more. So, but then at the bottom it says only in exceptional circumstances would off-site contributions be accepted. So are we going against our policy? Because it's written there in black and white. Thank you.
Would you like to add anything, Jean?
Yes, this current proposal, in your officer's view, conflicts with H5.
No, sorry to keep everyone waiting. Councillor Patel.
Following on Councillor Cheriton's comments, and I would tend to agree that going back and redoing the application. But given that there was some points made about some issues with communications between the officer that's obviously not with CBC anymore, and also Councillor Ramsey's good points as well. I mean, is there a possibility of just deferring the application and letting the applicant address some of the concerns that were raised and bringing it back. Is that a more efficient way of looking at it? Is that a possibility?
I mean, deferral is an option. I think officers are concerned, given the number of refusal reasons that that we're suggesting there are some major redesign and issues that need picking up. It's not sort of tweaking it. It's going to be looking at it sort of all over again. So in that case, it's not going to be the same scheme that comes back. So I think the preference from officer point of view would be to, if you like, start with a fresh application, because it's going to need to, you know, if we completely redesigned it, it's going to need republicity and everything else. It also gives the applicants the right to lodge an appeal, and then if they want to come back whilst that's running, they can appeal if they wish, and then continue dialogue with the local authority on a new case, on a new application.
Thank you. Councillor Hilton.
First of all, I think Councillor Maguire makes a good point about affordable housing, and I think it's got to be affordable and it's got to be good design, and I think on both those counts it's not a great existing scheme. And the only other thing I would like to mention at this point is the whole point about density. Looking actually at policy CL4, it is pretty clear that unless the existing, basically you can have a low density unless the existing character justifies a lower figure. You can have a lower figure, and that can be come back. I think the important thing here tonight is that as a committee, there's the whole design thing in the local plan policies, but we are listening to the local residents that density is an issue. We don't want big high flats. I will pass that all the time. I know Leo very well, but I don't think by refusing it means it will come back with higher flats. I think the committee has listened to it and will move on from that and take that in line when it comes back, if it's refused tonight. We hear you.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think that by removing the refusal reason 1, we are saying that we accept that we're happy with the 45 dwellings per hectare, and that, you know, this application is compliant with that 45 dwellings per hectare because it is an area that is full of character, and that justifies this lower figure. So we are agreeing that the density is a good density. What we don't like is the design, the road design, the garden sizes, the building at the front where the flats are. And we can refuse on those issues, that we don't like the design. We have concerns about the layout. We have concerns about the amenity space, and those are good refusal reasons. But we at the same time are happy that the density is about 45 dwellings per hectare. And I think by removing that reason 1, that gives us a clear reason to go with the officer's other recommendations to refuse on the grounds of design and layout. And I would hope that we would do that, because we're not saying that we want any, you know, we're saying that we are happy, and that gives a clear indication to the applicant that we are happy with that sort of density when a new application comes forward sometime in the future.
Want to say anything?
Can I just make a comment while they're pouring over there? In terms of the density figures, though, there was the applicant's agent put a different density figure to what was actually on the report. Can I just clarify that as well?
Thank you, Councillor Hilton.
Sorry, Chair, I'm not sure I can add any more comments on this really. Sorry. Well, yeah, there does seem to be a difference in how the density's been looked at by the agent and by ourselves, but I haven't got the workings for those in front of me this evening. As I say, that's something that could be looked at again with a later point.
Thank you, Chair. It was just a question of Councillor Chariton's point regarding going against the local plan. Correct me if I'm wrong, I just wanted to clarify, but are there not a requirement of 3-bedroom houses as part of the local plan? And I believe it was pointed out earlier by one of the speakers that this is actually the lowest level of that's currently achieved.
Jean, did you have anything to say?
3-bed houses are obviously not needed, but I would say that housing need in Crawley is considerable for all tenure types. There is, I think, a general shortage of 3-bed, but I haven't got any more information in front of me about that point.
Thank you. Khan.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to say that rather than accepting or refusing, can we not defer the application? Give the developer time to speak to the officers, because it looks like there has been some communication, I think, lacking here. And if they can speak to the officers and they can work something together and see if something can be done rather than any application. And how long does it take? Like if you defer an application rather than a new application, please.
This is, I think, yeah. That obviously, I think there's a lot that would need to be done to make this address these refusal reasons with this layout, which is why I'm not sure that for me as officer that the deferral is the right option. I should say that although the current officer, the case officer, has left, this is an amended design on an original design that the applicant originally submitted. So this isn't his first attempt at a layout. The earlier design was also considered unacceptable. So this is an iteration of it. And as I say, as a committee, you kind of need to make an application and decision in a timely way. So as I say, I think there's a lot of issues with this. It's not just we've got one or two small points. There's a lot to look at here, which is why I'm not sure that deferral is the right approach for this particular case.
Question.
Okay, very quickly.
Yeah, just very quickly, but it's an important point for clarification for the whole committee. If it's an outline application, does that mean the design can be changed at a later stage or not?
That was what you were saying before.
No.
Landscape. They can only change landscape.
Yes, what I thought, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, it's just landscaping that's left as a reserved matter for this one. So they're seeking to agree design and layout now.
Thank you. I just quickly want to add. I mean, I was going to echo what actually Councillor Khan and Councillor Patel said. I mean, I know it's just actually design and the character of the properties, but what if you set conditions on them, and the developers agree? I mean, we decide not to refuse. What happens then? What I mean is, what if you set conditions on them that it has to be the way you want them, like the character of design of a properties, like you want them to fit in with the street scene?
We don't have the powers to do that. That's not quite how the application process works. As a committee are asked to decide on what's being presented before them, which is what the applicants want you to consider this evening.
The application is for the fixed design that's on the screen there, and it can't be amended by condition.
A proposal, please.
Yeah.
Can I propose that we go forward to a vote, but before we do that, we remove the first condition, the condition on the density, because I think that gives a good steer to any future application that comes forward, that we've already debated about the density and we've made a good decision on that tonight, and that therefore that would have bearing on any future application.
Are we voting on deferral?
Can I just come in and explain the procedure here? I think there's a few different kind of proposals flying around. Councillor Jaggard has moved an amendment to the officer recommendation. Because that has been moved, we will need to seek a seconder for that. The planning officers have, I believe, provisionally confirmed that that amendment is okay, but we'll be coming to you for confirmation of that. If the planning officers accept that amendment, I will be asking the committee whether there is any objection to the addition of the amendment. If so, we will need to take a recorded vote on the addition of that amendment before moving to the vote on the recommendation to refuse. The result of the recorded vote of the amendment will obviously then depend on, then move forward, depend how we move forward to the vote. If the amendment is not seconded, then the amendment will fall and we'll move to a vote on the original recommendation. Otherwise, then the original recommendation will need to be voted on first before any alternative proposals, i.e. deferral, come in. So in any case, the officer recommendation will need to be voted on first before the alternative proposal of deferral.
So I have got to propose the amendment to remove the reason 1 from the refusal. I don't know how that would be worded, but I presume you know how that would be worded. Condition 1, and I want that completely removed, which was what the officers recommended was the best way forward. So I formally propose the removal of the reason 1.
Sorry, I don't want to protract this any longer than it already is. Yes, one option I did suggest was removal of condition 1. The other option, having reread the wording again whilst we've been talking, would be to reword it to, as I'll read it out now, so to remove reference to density from the actual wording and leave something in about efficient use of land and good quality urban design. So this, if you like, is another revised condition 1, or refusal, if you want to listen to it. So it's the proposed form of the and layout of the development fails to demonstrate efficient use of land and good quality urban design in this sustainable location, contrary to policies SD1, CL2, CL3, H3 and H3B of the adopted local plan. So we've effectively struck out most of the second line. So that's another option for you. So that reference to density and the policy has gone.
Yeah. I prefer just to remove the whole lot, I think. Is that possible? Yeah. So I propose that we remove number 1 from the whole thing, and then it doesn't actually mention efficient use of land or urban design densities. Because most of those urban design parts of it are referenced in refusal reason 2, the SD1, the CL1, the CL2 and the H3 are also referenced in the one below it. So it doesn't seem to be any point in duplicating that, in my opinion.
Okay, Councillor Jaggard has proposed an amendment to the officer recommendation to refuse, which is the removal of refusal reason 1 and then the renumbering of the other refusal reasons. I believe Councillor Mullins has offered to second that amendment. Thank you. So at this point, the planning officers, can I just have confirmation that would be acceptable in your terms? Thank you. So at this point, I'll ask the committee if there's any indication of any objection from any committee members on the inclusion of that amendment. If there is any objection, then we'll go to a recorded vote on that amendment. Councillor Sheraton.
It's not an objection, just a clarification, because I want to be sure that the points about urban design and efficient use do remain as reasons for refusal, because I think that's very important. That's one of our reasons for refusing this. If that can be confirmed, then yeah, I have no objection.
Yeah, I mean, the design policies are stretched across quite a few of the policies in the new plan. I think the main one that has that comfort for you is Strategic Policy CL2, which talks about making successful places and the principles of urban design. So I think it's still reflected in the other policies listed in the other refusal reasons.
I don't want to be pedantic, but just so I make sure I understand that if we remove refusal 1 and then we refuse the application and it comes back, does that mean that we're capping the density to where it was? I guess it doesn't, right? So I'm just trying to understand what is the purpose of it other than just giving a reason to refuse it. It's fine if it doesn't, but I just want to understand what is the impact of doing that.
You know, it wouldn't cap the density. What you obviously making a decision on the merits of this scheme tonight, and then if another one comes in, you've obviously got a planning history which reminds you how many units you thought was acceptable or unacceptable to, if you like, consider against the merits of a revised scheme, whether that's slightly more or slightly less than or whatever you see tonight. So this becomes a material consideration, your refusal.
Okay. Is there any objection from committee members on Councillor Jaggard's amendment to the refusal reasons? If there is no objection, then that amendment will pass and we'll move to a vote on the recommendation with the amendment included. Can you raise your hand if there's any objections to that, please? Okay, thank you. So we'll just proceed to the vote on the officer recommendation as amended.
Please, could I have a show of hands for all those for? For the officer's recommendation.
For the officer recommendation to refuse as amended. Can I just ask Councillor Khan for you to clarify, did you vote for the recommendation or to abstain, please?
No deferral.
The vote on the original recommendation takes place first, and if that vote is not passed, if the vote falls at that point, then there would need to be an alternative proposal, i.e. deferral, moved, seconded and voted on at that point. In this instance, the committee has voted in favour of the officer's recommendation, so there's no opportunity now for an alternative proposal to be moved and voted on. Okay. Your vote's an abstention. Thank you.
Application CR/2025/0345/OUT has been refused for the reasons set out in the report. Sorry? And as amended as well. Thank you. Okay. Thank you everyone for attending. So we will take 5 minutes break and then we'll come back in 5 minutes time at 9:42. Thank you.
Okay, we'll be restarting the meeting shortly, so if everybody could take their seats, please.
Good evening, everyone. Back to business, please, if you take your seats. Thank you. The next application is item 6, application CR/2022/0637/FUL Lazer Wall Spindle Way, Three Bridges. Can the planning officer please introduce the report?
Thank you, Chair. This current application seeks planning permission for a change of use of the Lazer Activity Centre from a leisure use in Class E to cash and carry for bulk purchases and business uses, which is a Class 8 B8, which is storage and distribution. It also includes a first floor extension to and some external alterations and changes to the external layout. I'd first like to an update to the report in relation to the drawing numbers. Unfortunately, it wasn't quite the right drawing numbers and drawings that have been on the report. If I can just run through these, if that's all right, to set out what they are. So the location plan is reference 1815-001 Rev A. The existing elevations are 58, drawing number 5870001. Topographic survey, which I think is still on the list, is 9334/1. Building survey 9334/2. Site layout ground floor GA is 1815-006 Rev J. Proposed first floor plan and sections is 1815-005 Rev H. Proposed elevations 1815-007 Revision D, and proposed roof plan is 1815-008 Revision B. In addition to that, there has one of the layout plan changed during the course of the application. The area around and I'll explain this now, but it will go into a bit more detail when I show the plans. The area around the protected trees in the group to the south is being retained. One parking space is lost, so therefore paragraph 5.18 needs to be changed to provide 14 parking spaces, 6 van and 2 lorry spaces, and that 2 of the 14 car parking spaces. Paragraph 5.19, cars could use 20 spaces, of which 2 disabled, and then just to confirm that even with these changes, the proposals still therefore comply with the parking annex within the local plan. So to start, just to explain where the site is, the unit in question is on the west side of Spindle Way. It's got 2 access points here and here onto Spindle Way. It's a single-storey commercial building with parking to the front, along here, and along the side down here. There are trees to the front protected by a TPO along here, and that's Tree Preservation Order Spindle Way number 3, which was confirmed in 2013. The site is elevated relative to Denvale Trading Park, which are the buildings to the north here and to the west, by approximately 2 metres. The other buildings in this area are commercial, The closest housing you cannot see on the plan here. It's out of distance, either 90 metres to the north or 75 metres to the east. So just show some of this in the photographs, which unfortunately I've not presented quite as well as my colleague. So this is a view of the front of the site from the north. So you can see the protected trees here in a line, mature species, very nice, very high amenity. The tree over here, which is in less good condition, is on the neighbouring site to the north. You can see the edge of one of the Denvale Trading Park buildings here. The building on the other side, I think it's pets, like a pet shop or pet services. As you can see, very commercial. And the building encases this brick building in front. So a few more photographs. That's looking at it from the south. So again, you can see the trees, the building, the parking area on the side here. You can see some examples of some of the parking around the area on the streets. This is a view down the southern side of it where the parking is. Again, to the rear you can see the buildings on Denvale Trading Park. The southernmost trees here on the right-hand side. And again, this is the view of the building from Denvale Trading Park. As you can see the screw fix here. This is the corner of the building. You can see here how elevated it is from that side. It's about 2 metres from here up to there. This view here, which will be sort of a little bit more important later, is the view along the north side of the building towards the neighbour's tree. It just shows really that there's no windows in the flank elevation of the neighbouring property or the applicant's property itself. And again, this image is taken, and it will become apparent a little bit later in the report when I explain about the amendments, which shows the relationship of the building and the canopies of the trees to the existing building as it is. As you can see, they overhang the building a little bit. Of course, they have got the potential to grow a little bit more. So as I noted before, the proposed change of use would include the addition of additional floor. This would be set back from the existing main front elevation by 6.7 metres. So you can see on this drawing here, I wish we could make that a little bit larger. Okay, so the building is this is the line of the existing building here. There's the extension on the top, and you can see that's set back with a bit of a balcony around it. The extension above there will provide 666 square metres of additional warehouse space. As I noted before, the applicant's indicated the site will be used for bulk purchases to predominantly commercial customers. Before the application was amended, there was to be a retail element to the proposal. There are issues with that given the parking provision for the area, so this is now purely just in relation to storage and distribution of bulk purchases and sales. So in principle, as the proposal is within the main employment area, both the change of use to storage and distribution and the provision of additional floor space are acceptable in principle, and it's considered they both therefore comply with policies EC1 and EC2 of the local plan. In terms of the impact on the character of the area, even with the additional floor, whilst increasing the bulk and massing of the building, as you can see here, it would not be out of keeping with development in this commercial area. There are some larger buildings around in the nearby locality. So even with the changing levels to Denvale Trading Park to the rear, given its context, it's not considered development would be harmful to public views from the west. Although it is considered that, let's see, look at the photograph, that because they're proposing to have a bin storage area along the back here, it's considered expedient to recommend that there's a fence along this line to screen the bin storage and things like that. They can be looking a little bit untidy. So that would actually screen it from those views from the west. But it is considered overall that the changes to the building and its impact in the street scene upon the character of the area will be acceptable in this commercial location. In terms of neighbour impacts, and I've mentioned some of this already, the height and massing increase is not considered to have a harmful impact on windows or the outlook of nearby commercial properties. As you see from the north, the closest property, they don't have any facing windows. Other properties are quite some distance away to the east. To the south, it's via the car park, and there's just the sloping roof facing it along this here. And again, round the back, it's the back end of the units in the trading park. So the physical manifestation of the building is not considered to have an impact on neighbouring occupiers. At the moment, as no plant is being proposed, there isn't concern about noise impacts on residential properties. They're some distance away, as say 75 metres to the east, with intervening buildings and other uses and activities going on, and about 90 metres to the north, again via buildings and an intervening road. As no plant's being proposed, at this moment there's no noise to be assessed. But if, however, the applicant does wish to install plants, it would require planning permission in its own right, the external plant, and therefore it would be judged on its own merits if it was to be submitted, and we would then assess the impacts of it at that time. So overall, it's considered the impacts here on neighbours would be acceptable. In terms of highway impacts, and parking, West Sussex County Council, as the Highway Authority, has confirmed there's no objection in terms of highway safety or capacity. The parking, even as amended, as I've noted, with that reduction in the parking space, which was come out from location here, would still comply with the Council's and West Sussex County Council's standards. The van spaces are considered equivalent to car spaces, but given the applicant is seeking this for more commercial visitors, it's useful to have the van spaces for slightly larger vehicles. In terms of lorry spaces, the ideal figure for a warehouse of this size would be for 4 spaces. However, the policy or the annex also only requires a minimum of 1 space. So in this instance, they're providing 2 spaces, which is more than the minimum, but not quite at the maximum, and this is considered acceptable as well. The applicant's also proposing 6 cycle spaces down here. Whilst we haven't got details of how they would be made covered, it's an adequate provision for the use, and so overall it's considered that the parking, access arrangements and bike storage would be acceptable for the development and would meet our standards.
Sorry, Mark, I'm just going to interrupt you here briefly. As we've hit 9:59, we do need to take a vote now to extend the meeting for half an hour, as we haven't completed the business within the 2.5 hours as set out in the Constitution. So we'll just pause you there, and we'll take that vote now and come back to you in just a few minutes. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. As the meeting has not been completed within the 2.5 hours set out in the Constitution, I will put it to a vote as to whether the committee wishes to continue. If the majority votes to continue the meeting, we will continue for another 30 minutes. If the majority votes to end the meeting, any item already underway will be debated and then voted upon. Any further items will be deferred to a future meeting. Can I have a show of hands for all those in favour of extending? Thank you. So the committee has voted to extend, so we will continue for a further 30 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate that. I haven't got a huge amount more to present, so hopefully. So the next issue I was going to address was trees. So as you can see in this drawing here, the trees are located at the front, and there's one just off the site here. So as I pointed out before, the top floor has been set back from the front. The original proposal was to have it in line with the front, and it was set back so that we still had space for the canopies of the trees and it wouldn't interfere with them. So the areas around the base of the trees is being retained, and on the basis that the areas around these retained trees and the canopy being set back, the impact on the trees is considered acceptable. To the north, the lorry parking could potentially have an impact on the tree to the north. The council's arboriculture officer thinks the impact on this could be acceptable, subject to conditions to control the form of development and the foundations, the materials and everything that go on that level. So it's therefore considered that the development would maintain the amenities of the trees on site. Ecology and sustainability. So the development's shown that it can provide biodiversity to comply with the requirements of the Ecology Policy GI3, but this would be subject to conditional control. And in relation to sustainability requirements, it's also shown that it can meet these, and these would be subject to control as well. There's a requirement for some infrastructure contributions, one for an employment and skills plan to be provided, and that also includes a requirement for a contribution of £2,138.53, and there's also a requirement for contribution towards public art, which is at £18,399.52. Both of these would be subject to completion of Section 1 agreement. So in every other respect, it's considered the development would be acceptable, subject to conditions recommended, and it's therefore recommended that this is granted permission granted is, what's the term? It's a resolution is made to permit subject to the completion of the Section 106 agreement in conjunction with the head of planning and economy. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark, for your presentation. There are no speakers, so we will move on to a debate. Do any committee members wish to speak? Please raise your hand. Jasmine?
Thank you, Chair. I think it's a really good idea because the other day I was thinking about it, for we don't really have a big cash and carry in Crawley, so I think this is a really good idea that we're going to have this cash and carry, because all the businesses are really going out of Crawley to go and buy the items in bulk. So I think this is going to be good for having cash and carry, and it's going to be good for the locals. So yeah, well done.
Councillor Khan. Any other members? Councillor Jaggard?
Thank you. I've got no objections to this application. It's just very disappointing that our young people are increasingly having their facilities closed down. My children are now too old to go there, but they used to love going to Lazer World, and it's the same, in various different places. Stuff for our young people is being closed down, and similarly the application that's been withdrawn was again a youth facility that is being closed down, and I do worry what our young people are going to be doing, how they're going to be able to keep them occupied and off the streets. So although I don't object to the application, I would like to say that I am a bit concerned about our young people.
Councillor Mullins?
Thank you. I should be sad to see it go. I'm actually going there on Sunday afternoon, taking my child for his birthday party. So he won't be very impressed to hear it's going to go. But we have to move on. And this is a commercial area. It's not really the right place for what's there at the moment. I think there's better places it could be. I've only got a couple of concerns. One is obviously because of the change of use, instead of just cars coming in and out, it's now going to be vans and lorries. And I don't know if any consideration has been given to how many lorry movements there are likely to be, because this is quite a congested area already, because there are an awful lot of commercial businesses in that, packed into that area. And the only one very small thing is it's going to be two floors. Is there a lift? Because if you're going to be moving heavy packages up and down, I wouldn't like to think of people humping them up and down stairs, and I can't see one on the plan, but it's not easy to see from here.
Yes, Mark, if you want to add.
Thank you, Chair. So you're absolutely right that there are parking issues and access issues in this area. There's one of the issues. It's one of the reasons why this is not a retail use, because that would have involved far more movements. Historically, this building was a warehouse. It was a Littlewoods warehouse prior to becoming Lazer Tag. So, but with the lorry parking, which is more than the minimum and not quite the maximum, and at the moment the arrangements are, well, it's not dissimilar to the car parking arrangements are on the site at the moment. There may well be an uplift because I think the hours are likely to extend more than the use of the laser tag and everything else. And I imagine that there might be more people at certain times, but again, the bulk sales and the should limit that to a certain extent. So we shouldn't have that enormous numbers of the public coming along to it. I can't remember what the other part was. Oh, the lift, yes. Sorry, I zoomed in on it. No, there is. So the building, they're proposing there's a pallet lift in the corner. So absolutely the case. I'll show you this is the upper floor. So as you can see, there's a sedum roof's being proposed at the front here, and the warehouse at the back. I think there's a little bit of an issue with this drawing, and this one's okay. That shows you can get to the lift. So yeah, so the access ramp would be up the side here from the lorries, which at the moment is like undeveloped. So.
Just to come back to the lorries, is there a restriction on the size of lorries? Because some lorries these days are absolutely enormous, and negotiating in that sort of, as you said, quite confined area.
No, planning control really can't control what vehicles go where. The owners themselves do have some responsibility, like they do in the existing site, to manage movements in and out as well. What we're looking at, so the overall provision of parking and things here should be acceptable for the use. There have been some recent changes in this area. So when I first visited it, there was parking all over the verges, but what's happened is that lots of rocks have been put down, and now the grass verges aren't being parked on such a physical obstacle. So it does look a bit better than it was. I don't think the parking issues up there are really caused by the use of this site. There's a lot of other uses in the area, and there's quite heavy parking demand. So thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Bidwell.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to echo Councillor Mullins's questions regarding parking. So the report suggests there are 2 lorry parking spaces, 6 vans and 15 cars. And I think, aside from the parking itself, I'm concerned about the congestion it's going to cause on the road. It's a pretty slim road as it is. So yeah, I don't know whether... I don't know if there are any thoughts on that from anyone at all, really.
No, I can come back on that. So there have been pretty extensive discussions that have been going on with this application throughout the course of it with West Sussex County Council in relation to a number of these issues. Notable concerns from the local planning authority about the parking provision, the potential knock-on effects on the street, which is the reason for the it's one of the reasons why it's coming forward with a recommendation to permit, because it's a change to a B8 storage and distribution rather than being a general sort of retail use, which has much more potential for greater movements. Because of the nature of the activity, which should be ware and distribution, there should be fewer movements associated with it than there would be with a retail. And again, the building was historically a warehouse, so it's going back to its previous use, even though it's enlarged. And the County Council have looked at this, and they don't have an objection to the proposal in terms of the lorries, the vans, and the manoeuvring and everything else that goes with it. They are the authority that do provide us with the professional advice as a statutory consultee in relation to highway safety and capacity issues, and on that basis, and they haven't objected. They do think acceptable subject to conditions, and that's why it's been recommended for permission. Thanks.
Thank you. Do any other members have any concerns, queries? Yes, Nick.
I know how busy that area is because my brother used to, well, I don't have to disclaim just because he used to work in that area until he retired through ill health there a year or two, and he used to have to get there really early in the morning to park and stuff. And I know it's going to be commercial businesses collecting their cash and carrying stuff, but although it's above the parking standards, I would have some concerns. Have we spoken to the applicant about any plans to mitigate? Is there any other areas they could perhaps park in, or have we considered? I know it's difficult when highways says okay. I understand that when the highways ground says okay, but were any other options looked at?
So I'm I'm going to be speaking a little bit on behalf of the applicant here, in that part of the purpose for this is to divide as far as supporting information, was divide the retail offer in West Green from the more commercial-based business based here. So not to have the retail element the same element, and the retail element was the local authority's real concern with submission of the application. So the actual provision here is they're over provided with car parking spaces versus the council standard, not by very much, but it is a slight over provision. We think on that basis, yes, and as such, it's not really possible to consider other sites when the proposal itself is effectively policy compliant. So it's complying with our parking annex at the rear of the local plan. I'm very aware of some of the parking issues that there have been in the area around here. I've been looking at this site for a number of years whilst we were wrestling with water neutrality, and the situation is better with the actions that have been taken to stop people parking on the grass verges and everything else, providing these physical barriers. I think in this case the applicant will have to manage some of its parking arrangements. We can't manage that. It falls outside our remit. We're not kind of traffic wardens and things like that. But with the parking provision provided being adequate, more than adequate, it should be acceptable.
Thank you. So, Councillor Cheriton, as you haven't spoken yet.
Just very briefly, I would say I think we're all aware of the difficulties in parking in Spindle Way. You've got it's unbelievably difficult to park in that area, and I understand the concern. But if I was the business owner, I would want to ensure that access to my business was as obstacle-free as possible. So some of the onus of this, of managing any parking issues, surely falls to the owner of the business. Outside of, if it's met our minimum standards in terms of parking and so on, as much as we can do as an authority, and the rest must fall to the commercial organisation here. Because effectively, if they have poor parking, if people have a poor experience coming to use their facilities here, to come to the cash and carry, it's just going to deter people from going there. So they'll simply go somewhere else. So I can see that there's a strong argument for the business owner to ensure that they have adequate, if you like, traffic management.
Thank you, Councillor Cheriton. Did you want to add anything, Mark? Thank you. Councillor Bidwell, and then it'll be Councillor Jasmine. So if you both make it very quick, and then we can go on to the vote. Thank you.
Thank you. So it does actually mention, to be fair, in the report that there were representations made by a business with regard to potentially having parking restrictions, time parking restrictions. And I wonder, in our capacity as the planning authority, it's not a consideration for planning particularly, but can we maybe reach out to West Sussex to try and get some sort of consultation considered in the area?
There have been some changes on the highway. So, as I say, these physical obstacles have gone down by the side of the road. So when I first went out to see this, which was during COVID, and when we had water neutrality, there were literally vehicles double parked all the way up the roads, and that's not the case at the moment. The last time I went there, which was a few weeks ago, the road was much clearer, which was a delight compared with previous times. I think the County Council have been looking at it. They must have been making some alterations because there are changes since I first visited the site. Ultimately, it is a matter for the County Council as to what they're going to do with these parking areas. I'm afraid in this particular instance, we're only looking at this particular application and not really able to extend what the local planning authority can do in relation to the County Council. But there have been changes, and I think they've been positive on the area. There's no doubt about that. So I'm not sure I can add very much more, I'm afraid.
Councillor Yasmin.
Thank you. I just want to quickly mention that in the other premises that they've got, the Ifield Road one, they have got parking attendants. I'm hoping at this one that you will have a parking attendant as well, so they can keep an eye on the traffic. So that's working quite well now.
Thank you. As everyone has spoken, we will now move on to the vote. The recommendation is to permit. As the chair, I will move the recommendation. Can I ask the vice chair to second, please?
I second the recommendation.
Thank you. Please can I have a show of hands of all those for? Thank you. All those against? And all those abstaining? Thank you. Application CR/2022/0637/FUL has been permitted, subject to the conditions set out in the report. Thank you. Agenda item 9 is planning application CR/2025/0525/FUL 5 Perryfield Road, Southgate. Please can the planning officer introduce the report?
Thank you, Chair. This application is for the conversion of the existing building at 5 Perryfield Road, demolition of an existing rear extension, and erection of a 2-storey rear extension to provide 4 affordable flats with associated cycle storage, refuse facilities, landscaping and associated works. The application site is on the screen before you now. As you'll see, it occupies a slot at the junction of Perryfield Road with Lyndhurst Close on the northern side. And as you see, it's quite a prominent site due to the location on the corner. The property itself is a 2-storey Victorian house. And it was previously used as a drop-in centre for people with learning disabilities, but that service ceased some 10 years ago now, and it's currently in use as a single house. Just before I go into the report, there have been a few updates to the plan drawings since the report was published. I won't go through them line by line, but been a few revisions. In essence, what's happened is there's been a slight alteration to the balcony design to improve their appearance. And the second change is a relocation of the air source heat pumps that originally were sited at low level on the east elevation facing the neighbour at 3 Perryfield Road. So they were on the side wall here. They've now been relocated to the west elevation, away from that neighbour, facing Lyndhurst Close. This change will reduce any potential noise disturbance from that plant on the neighbours, and also they're not visible from street scene because they'll be behind a boundary fence. So overall, that's considered to be a positive alteration. So quickly show you the application site just to get you familiar with the context. So the first drawing on the left is the front elevation. As you see, it's a Victorian house with sort of characteristic bay windows and a red brick design. The view, the top right, is the elevation onto Lyndhurst Close. You can see it's quite an open boundary there. With a 2 metre close board fence along the boundary. This is the elevation towards the property at 3 Perryfield Road, and again just an idea of the frontage. So currently the property has a vehicular access that runs down the side between the house and the next door neighbour. As you see that's taken off a couple of spaces. The access itself occupies some road occupies some road space and has necessitated some double yellow lines on Perryfield Road itself. And the view from the back of the rear garden, there's obviously a lean-to outbuilding or a single-storey outbuilding here and another two-storey element here. The proposal will remove those and replace them with the new extension. And that's just a view from further down the garden, looking back. So it's got quite a generous rear garden. You can see the relationship with the neighbouring property number 3, which is to the east. So the application seeks conversion of the existing building from a single dwelling to to 4 self-contained 4-person flats. The additional accommodation needed to do that conversion being through the creation of a a 2-storey rear extension on the back of the building, which is shown where my cursor is here. There would be a communal garden area retained for the residents to the rear, and each flat has a patio area or a balcony. Flats would be accessed from the main entrance door from Perryfield Road. As I say, the 2-storey extension is to the rear. Each flat is laid out with living room, kitchen, front, and the bathroom, bedroom located towards the rear of the building. That's just the existing layout as it is currently. Whoops. Existing floor plans, and here are the proposed. So again, this is the ground floor plan. The upper floor flats are the same design. So again, showing the living space in the sort of effectively the old part of the building and the bedroom, bathroom in the extended part to the rear. And then the upper floor, similar design. That's just the roof plan. So you see the roof plan. The design of the extension has a hipped roof. The deliberate intention was to have it to be a separate structure from the existing building. So it has a flat roof, sort of recessed element, and then a sort of zinc roof on top to make it deliberately different from the original Victorian building. That's the existing front elevation, Perryfield Road. Again, that's showing the existing extensions that are coming out and off. You can see them again in side view. These are coming down to make room for the new extension. Should also say that the existing Victorian dwelling would be refurbished and new windows and existing windows made good and the existing exterior tidied up. The applicants are proposing to replicate the existing Victorian features on the front of the building. Okay, and this is a view of the extension from Lyndhurst Close. Obviously there's a 2-metre close board fence along the boundary. You can see that the existing Victorian dwelling is very distinct and separate at the front of the site, and then you've got this modern addition, quite deliberately different towards the rear. So in terms of the modern design, this is a deliberate contrast to the Victorian building. It avoids, or there were various designs, I think, worked through with officers trying to work out whether they could sort of tie in an extended element to the Victorian roof, and it was felt perhaps that it was better to go for a visual break and have something completely different here, which is what they've settled for with this design. So it's deliberately smaller in terms of its height and scale, and would be subservient to the main building. and the flat roof recessed element in between does help sort of separate the parts of the building out. It's to be clad in a red-brown tile hanging, and there would be a zinc silver grey roof on the extension. This is where the air source heat pumps would be sited. That's the view from the back, looking back towards the house. So you can see the balconies that are provided, one for each flat. And as I say, it's obviously a bold addition to the original house, but in this case it's considered it has been sympathetically designed in terms of scale and massing and colour, and subject to appropriate details. It's considered that this can tie in quite successfully with the house and keep the distinct features of the Victorian dwelling as well at the front. That's the view from the neighbour's side. So in terms of the accommodation provided, you'll see from the report that it all meets the nationally described space standards. It's also compliant with Part M, addresses local plan policy DD2 for the ground floor flats. And as I say, has a good standard of external amenity space provided with the garden and the balconies. In terms of the impact on the neighbour, this is the side that the neighbour would see. The neighbour most affected is probably number 3, Lyndhurst Close, which is to the east. Let's go back to the first drawing. The kind of required sort of test in terms of outlook and overlooking has been done from the nearest window here. And it does show that there is an acceptable view still retained out from the near side window out over their garden. This is considered to be a suitable distance set back. There is quite a separation between the side wall and the boundary. So it's just a slight intersection at one of the balconies, which is further away. The other houses directly behind, which would sort of directly overlook, are some 27 metres distant. So again, in terms of window to window distances, it's considered to be compliant. There is no parking proposed for this development. The intention is to close up the existing access at the front here.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Jean. Our 30 minutes extension is almost over. So as the meeting has not been completed within 30 minutes extension, I will put it to a vote as whether the committee wishes to continue. The same process applies as our previous vote to extend. Can I have a show of hands for all those in favour of extending? I know, not me. I've got to work tomorrow. And all those against? So the meeting has been extended, but hopefully it won't be 30 minutes. Thank you, Jean.
I'll be as quick as I can. So yes, in terms of the existing access, that is being closed up. And as you'll see, there is cycle provision provided at the back of the site for each resident. They've each got their own lockable bike store. Effectively, the off-street parking spaces will be re-provided back on street outside in Perryfield Road. So the area that was double-lined will become, if you like, free public parking again. As you'll see from the officer report, it's considered that is an acceptable in terms of parking for this particular development, as the additional parking would be, for the benefit of the wider community. So it has sufficient cycle storage, and as I say, it is in a location which is very close to the town centre. As you'll see from the report, the landscaping policies have been addressed, as have biodiversity net gain, subject to suitable conditions. Sustainability has also been addressed in the report, say with ground source heat pumps, and water efficiency measures and solar panels. So it's a sustainable scheme in line with our policies. The development is 100% affordable housing, and so overall it is a slightly more intensive use of the site. We're up to 58 dwellings per hectare here, but it's acceptable in principle. The extension, while contrasting with the house, is considered acceptable in scale and design, and is considered to be a positive addition to the street scene. The scheme respects the amenities of the neighbouring properties and creates a suitable environment for future occupants. So overall, the scheme is considered to be acceptable. The recommendation is to permit, subject to the legal agreement and the planning conditions listed in the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean, for your presentation. There are no speakers, so we will move on to a debate. Do any members wish to speak, please? Yes, Councillor Chowdhury and then Councillor Bidwell. Thank you.
Thank you. A couple of questions. First question is, there's not a chance this is going to be converted into a 5-storey block of flats, is there? No? Okay, thank you. The other question, the more serious question, is in terms of the design of the extension, does that, because I'm well aware that we would normally try to build something that it's in character with the area. Is that compliant with that requirement? Because it looks quite contrasting with, as you quite yourself say, it does contrast with the Victorian building at the front. I'm interested to hear your comments on that one.
Yeah, as we know from the planning committee, design is always a subjective area. I think there was a lot of toing and froing with this design. Obviously, the important thing I think was to keep the identity and the character of the existing Victorian property, and there was some merit in paring back the sort of built form off the back of that, taking down the old extensions and sort of going back to the original symmetry and form of the original house, because it's got quite distinct chimneys, got a nice roof design, 2 distinct bays, it's quite symmetrical. So taking off these sort of brick built additions on the back, the argument was it was sort of bring the symmetry and the balance back to its original proportions. And then it was how do we make best use of land and extend it. There were sort of ideas of, you know, if you need a 2-storey, putting something tied into the roof at the top, but that sort of just didn't quite sit right. So the idea ended up being more of a linkway design. So you can clearly read the 2 elements, the two sort of evolution of the building from the Victorian to the modern. So I think subject to suitable high quality materials, this could look really quite striking and different, and I think you'll read the evolution of the building as in 2 parts. But with design, as people realise, it's often a matter of judgment. But we would say that subject to suitable materials, and this has been carefully detailed out, this could be a really successful design. So it just reads the evolution of the building better. Thank you.
May I just follow up on that? Just to be clear, how does it sit with the, because quite often again the planning consideration is how the character of the additional building in effect fits in with the character of the rest. Does it stand out, like, you know, very brazenly, and if so, does it do in a way which is, how can you say, enhances the area, the street scene, if you want to call it, or does it stand out as something that perhaps passers-by may think, what's that doing there?
Yeah, I get what you're saying. We don't want to stand out like a sore thumb. I think if you look at the side elevation here, you'll see that there have been some architectural nods to the existing building. If you look carefully at the eaves line here, you can see there's a strong continuation of that design and line through. The windows are carefully proportioned and do tie in with the sort of window lines and proportions of the original building. And just in terms of where the detailing sits, it does sit quite sympathetically. So I think someone has put a modern slant on it, but has tried to do it, you know, considering the architectural rhythm of the old building. So as I say, it'll be down to the detailing and the quality of the finish, I think, to make sure that this sits comfortably in the street scene. I should say as well that Lyndhurst Close to the north of it is of a different architectural period as well and character. So I'm not sure, there is a sort of transition as you move away from walk towards the walk north into Lyndhurst Close. So, but from the sort of, if you like, the original street scene, if you're walking down Perryfield Road, you're going to see, hopefully going to see the Victorian house first, and that will be your, and that will still stand there as the focal point.
Thank you. Councillor Bidwell.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, to be honest, took the words right out of my mouth. That was pretty much where I was going. I'm very glad for the refurb of the original house. I'm very glad to say we're doing what we can to try and preserve that. However, I do take issue with the modern style of flats. And the reason for this is because it seems we have an inconsistency when it comes to our approach across other applications. We were looking at an application earlier today, and that was very much a consideration. So can I just understand what, why there's been, I guess, an inconsistency here when it comes to the look of the building?
As I say, it's very much taken on a case-by-case basis, looking at the site context. So this area is not in a conservation area. It is a Victorian. It's an old part of the old town, but it's not sort of an area of special character. There are a series, if you looked at the wider street scene, of Victorian buildings, but also flatted developments in and around Perryfield Road. So the character of the area has changed a bit, and it is a bit more of an eclectic mix of designs. So although we're sort of mixing an old and a new, it was just felt, I think in this case, as far as the officer was concerned, that this just seemed like the right approach in the context of the wider street. There are flats already, they're of different designs. As I say, just extending the deep roof of a Victorian style extension further back just seemed too dominant, particularly on the neighbouring property. And as I say, the design, I think, is designed to be looked at from the front and the side and the rear as well. I think in this case they've tried to respond to the fact it is quite a prominent corner, but it does give you the strong Victorian. It does retain the integrity of the Victorian frontage from Perryfield Road. So they were trying to look at it from all directions.
Okay, thanks for that. And yeah, I respect the reasoning for that. And I understand that it may make sense when considering, I guess, the local area. But for me, it's I find it quite disappointing personally. But that's just my take.
Thank you, Councillor Jaggard.
Thank you. Yeah, number 5 is a very attractive Victorian building, and I disagree with my two colleagues that have just spoken, because I'm really pleased about the separation with the two parts. It's often good practice in design when you're to have a contemporary, really modern looking extension to then, so that it highlights the old Victorian part and makes a clear distinction with the more modern extension, and that's often the case, and it makes the two parts look separate, and I think it will actually give a much lighter and less bulky extension than one that would have, if the roof had continued across, I think it would have looked much more heavy in the situation, and now it gives a much more lighter and airier feel. So I'm really pleased about that. That actually I think is a very good design. I'm very pleased also with the interior of this development. I was sitting on the planning committee for all the recent ones that go back to almost 10 years now. Oh my God! And the inside of these flats are very attractive. They seem very spacious actually, so that's really good. What I am a little bit disappointed about is the no on-site parking, though. I can see what you're saying about giving one more space along the road. However, potentially you could get 2 vehicles on the drive, I don't know. But my question really is, will the residents be able to apply for a residence parking permit in that location? Because as much as we like people to use bicycles, they often have cars.
I'm afraid I don't have that answer with me on the agenda papers. I would hope so. I mean, it's an existing building now, but I haven't got that answer.
It's just on the previous application, Three Bridges, the residents of that were not able to.
They'd been specifically told that they couldn't.
Yeah, so I just wanted to make that clear.
That hasn't been said here. And as I say, I think there is some merit in allowing, freeing up more road space. So hopefully that will offset it.
Thank you, Councillor Hilton.
Just a couple of things really. I noticed there was no objection to the planning application received, and I assume we went out to all the people as statutes required, etc. So that's interesting. There's no comments. The second thing is obviously my portfolio role as environment, sustainability and climate change. I'm very pleased to see the air source heat pump there. That's good, and it shows the applicant, whoever the applicant is, the applicant is aware of the green building and doing things the right way environmentally, and I would applaud the applicant for that. But I was quite interested to see that you actually moved it. Was that a discussion? I'm quite interested to see that you decided to move it around the corner, but that wasn't as a result of any objections received. So I'd be quite interested to see the thought process behind that. And congratulations for installing it in the first place.
I did ask the case officer that. Yes, and basically he was concerned that it probably wasn't the most it's a bit antisocial to put them facing the near side neighbour, and it just seemed that there was no good reason why it couldn't be put on a wall facing a road where it would be of less disturbance to anyone else. It wasn't specifically that there was a problem with noise emission from these installations. It was more just a nice thing to do for the neighbour.
Thank you. Do any other members wish to speak or have a query, concern? Thank you. We will now move on to the... Oh, sorry, Sumali.
Just a really quick one, because it's a conversion of a house, and from the pictures I couldn't see any more, only one entrance in and out of the front. And is there any sort of fire escape or way out at the back or anything like that?
It is only a 2-storey building. Obviously, the ground floor flats have direct access from the balconies, the rear bedrooms out the back, and the others would presumably be able to get onto the balconies. So, dare I say, if there was a fire, they could be got down from there. But no, there is just one way in and out through the front door.
Thank you. We will now move on to the debate, onto the vote, sorry. The recommendation, just remembered, the recommendation is to permit. As the chair, I will move the recommendation. Can I ask the vice chair to second, please?
Yeah, I second the recommendation.
Thank you. Please can I have a show of hands for all those for, all those against, and all those abstaining. Application CR/2025 0525/FUL has been permitted, subject to the conditions set out in the report. As there's no supplementary agenda, so there's no more business for the committee, the meeting is now closed at 22:44. That's 10:44. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your evening. If there's